The red ink bled across Leo's paper like an open wound. Mrs. Agatha Pringle held the essay high above her perfectly coiffed head, her lips twisted into that smile, the one that made 10-year-old Leo Sterling want to disappear into the floor. "Class, let's discuss Leo's creative interpretation of heroism," she announced, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Leo's small hands gripped the edges of his desk until his knuckles turned white. "He writes here," Mrs. Pringle continued, adjusting her designer reading glasses, "that his father is the bravest man alive." How touching. She paused for effect, scanning the classroom of privileged children who hung on her every word. "Shall we tell the class what makes your father so brave, Leo? Was it the armed robbery? Or perhaps the assault charges?" The classroom erupted in laughter, that cruel, herd mentality laughter that only children and cowards can produce. Leo's eyes burned, but he refused to let them see him cry. Not again. Mrs. Pringle walked to his desk, her heels clicking against the polished floor like a judge's gavel. She dropped the paper in front of him. A giant red zero stared back at him, along with words that would haunt him for weeks. "Criminals are not heroes. Tell your father to stay away from this school. We don't need his kind here." What Mrs. Pringle didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know as she returned to her desk with that self-satisfied smirk, was that at that exact moment, 300 miles away, a pair of steel gates were grinding open, and the man who had spent 3 years behind them was about to teach her a lesson she would never forget. The morning sun hit Damon Ghost Sterling's face for the first time in 3 years without bars casting shadows across it. He stood outside Ironwood State Penitentiary, a duffel bag containing everything he owned slung over one broad shoulder. His silver-gray eyes, the ones that had earned him his road name, scanned the parking lot with the hyper-awareness of a man who had learned to watch every corner, every shadow, every potential threat. Then he heard it. The rumble started low, like distant thunder, but grew into a symphony of chrome and fury. 50 motorcycles rounded the corner in perfect formation, their engines synchronized in a war cry that announced the return of one of their own. At the front rode Marcus "Brick" Thompson, president of the Silent Wolves MC. The man was built like his road name suggested, 6'4" of solid muscle, with a salt and pepper beard that reached his chest. Behind him, the entire club had turned out. 50 brothers, 50 bikes, 50 sets of colors bearing the snarling wolf's head that marked them as family. They rolled to a stop in perfect unison, kickstands dropping with military precision. Brick was off his bike first, and despite his size, he moved with surprising speed. He grabbed Damon in a bear hug that would have crushed a smaller man. "Welcome home, brother." Damon's stoic expression cracked, just slightly. "Good to be back, Prez." One by one, the others came forward. Viper, the club's lawyer and sergeant-at-arms, gripped his hand firmly. "Did my time. Did it quiet," Viper said, the highest compliment a man could receive in their world. Damon had taken a fall for a gun charge that would have put Brick away for life. He'd served every day of his 3-year sentence without complaint, without snitching, without breaking. "Where's Leo?" Damon asked, his voice rough from disuse. Brick's expression shifted, something dark passing behind his eyes. "He's with your mom. Kids, he's excited to see you, Ghost." But what? "You'll see. Let's get you home first." The ride to Damon's small house on the outskirts of town was a procession. 50 motorcycles escorting one of their own back to civilian life. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Some waved. The Silent Wolves had a reputation for being hard but fair in this blue-collar neighborhood. Others pulled their children inside, prejudice outweighing reality. Damon's mother was waiting on the porch, tears streaming down her weathered face. "My boy," she whispered, pulling him close. "Hey, Ma." He held her gently, aware of how fragile she'd become in 3 years. "He's in his room," she said quietly, understanding what Damon needed most. "He hasn't stopped talking about this day for weeks, but when I told him you were coming today, he got quiet." "Something's not right, Damon. Something's hurting my grandson." Damon's jaw tightened. He climbed the stairs to Leo's room, each step feeling heavier than the last. The door was covered with drawings of motorcycles and wolves. He knocked softly. "Come in." Leo sat on his bed, a skinny kid with Damon's silver eyes and his mother's gentle features. He looked up, and for a moment, father and son just stared at each other, bridging 3 years of absence in a single heartbeat. Hey, little man. Dad. Leo launched himself off the bed, and Damon caught him, lifting him into the air like he used to when Leo was tiny. The boy had grown. He was 10 now, not the 7-year-old Damon had left behind. You got big, Damon said, his voice thick. You got the same, Leo said, then laughed at his own awkward response. They sat together on the bed, and Damon noticed immediately what his mother had meant. Leo's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. His shoulders were hunched inward, like he was trying to make himself smaller, less visible. School going okay? Damon asked carefully. Leo's expression shuddered. It's fine. 3 years in prison had taught Damon to read people, to spot lies from truth, fear from bravado. His son was lying. Leo, it's fine, Dad. Really, tell me about where you were. Was it scary? Damon let it go. For now. They talked until sunset, carefully dancing around the hard truths. Damon offering sanitized stories about being away, Leo avoiding anything about his daily life at Rosewood Academy, the private school he attended on a scholarship that Damon's mother had somehow secured. But that night, as Damon helped Leo pack his backpack for school the next day, he saw it. A crumpled paper shoved deep into the bottom of the bag, stained with what looked like teardrops. His hands moved on instinct, smoothing out the wrinkled essay. The title read, My Hero by Leo Sterling. Damon read his son's words. Beautiful, honest words about loyalty and bravery and love. About how his father was the strongest man he knew. How he'd do anything for his family. How that was what real heroism meant. And then he saw the grade. 0. And the comment, written in sharp, judgmental red ink. Criminals are not heroes. Tell your father to stay away from this school. We don't need his kind here. See me after class, Leo. Your family situation is becoming a distraction. Signed, Mrs. A. Pringle. Damon's hands began to shake. Not with sadness. With a cold, focused rage that he'd learned to harness behind bars. He read the comment again, then looked at the small wet stains on the paper. His son's tears. He folded the paper carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket. Downstairs, Brick was waiting with a few of the brothers. They'd stayed to welcome Damon home properly. One look at Damon's face, and Brick was on his feet. What happened? Damon handed him the paper. Brick read it once, twice, then passed it to Viper. The room went silent except for the crinkling of paper as it made the rounds. Each man's expression grew darker. I know that school, said Viper quietly. He was the club's lawyer, a man who'd put himself through law school while running with the Wolves. Rosewood Academy. Rich kids, richer parents. They probably gave Leo a scholarship to check some diversity box. And this teacher? Damon's voice was ice. Agatha Pringle. Been there 20 years. Untouchable, or so she thinks. Viper's eyes gleamed. But I did some work for a former student a few years back. Workplace harassment case. From what I gathered, Mrs. Pringle has a history of, let's call it selective cruelty. She targets kids she thinks are beneath her social class. She called my son's father a criminal in front of his entire class, Damon said softly. She made him cry. She humiliated a 10-year-old child. Brick cracked his knuckles. Want me to pay her a visit? Convince her to apologize? No. Damon's smile was cold and sharp. I want to do this right. I want to make sure she understands exactly what she's done, and I want to make sure it never happens again. Not to Leo, not to any other kid she decides to target. Viper leaned forward. What are you thinking? I saw a flyer on Leo's bulletin board. Next Friday is career day at his school. Parents come in, talk about their jobs, inspire the kids. Damon's silver eyes glinted. Mrs. Pringle wants to know what I do. I think it's time we showed her. Brick's grin was feral. Oh, I like where this is going. We do this legal. We do this by the book, Damon continued. But we do it with everyone. Full club turnout. All 50 of us, one of the brothers asked. All 50. Full colors. Best behavior. Damon looked at each man in turn. We're going to teach Mrs. Pringle that the criminals she despises are better men than she could ever hope to be. And we're going to do it in front of her entire class, the other teachers, and anyone else who wants to watch. Viper pulled out his phone. I'll call the school tomorrow, register you as a career day participant. As Leo's legal guardian, you have every right to attend. I'll make sure we're on the list. And the rest of us? Brick asked. Guest speakers, Viper said smoothly. I'll cite Educational Code Section 44 to 22, which allows schools to bring in community organizations for cultural education. The Silent Wolves MC is a registered nonprofit. We do toy runs, veteran support, highway cleanup. We're legitimate community members. She won't know what hit her, murmured one of the younger members. Oh, she'll know exactly what hit her, Damon corrected. That's the point. The next week passed in careful preparation. This wasn't a brawl in a parking lot or a show of force against a rival club. This was psychological warfare, and Damon planned it with the precision of a military operation he'd learned about from books in the prison library. Brothers, Brick's voice boomed across the clubhouse the following Saturday. 50 men stood at attention. Next Friday, we ride to war. But this ain't the kind of war we're used to. Damon stepped forward. This is about respect. This is about showing a woman who thinks she's better than us, better than our families, better than our kids, that she's wrong. We're going to do it without throwing a punch, without raising our voices, without giving her any excuse to call us the criminals she thinks we are. So how do we scare her? Asked a prospect named Tommy. We don't scare her, Viper interjected, pulling out a folder thick with documents. We intimidate her with legitimacy. I've been doing research. Mrs. Pringle has been reported 7 times in the last 5 years for discriminatory behavior. None of the complaints went anywhere because the parents who filed them didn't have the resources or knowledge to push back. We do. He spread photographs across the pool table. Screenshots of social media posts where Mrs. Pringle had made classist comments. Testimonies from former students. Documentation of complaints that had been buried. We're going to present our profession, brotherhood, loyalty, community service, and in doing so, we're going to make her look like the small, petty tyrant she is, Damon explained. But first, we need to look the part. That's when things got interesting. Brick, a man who normally wouldn't be caught dead worrying about appearances beyond keeping his colors clean, became a drill sergeant. I want every bike polished until I can see my reflection in the chrome. I want every piece of leather oiled and conditioned. I want your boots shined, your jeans clean, and your faces shaved. We're representing the Wolves, and we're representing Leo. The clubhouse became a hive of activity. Grown men who'd faced down rival gangs and prison riots were suddenly debating the proper way to polish chrome and whether they should iron their jeans. The consensus? Yes, but don't tell anyone outside the club. Damon worked on his own bike late into the night, thinking about Leo. His son had come home from school every day that week looking a little more defeated. Mrs. Pringle, emboldened by Leo's silence, had apparently doubled down, making snide comments about family values and proper role models. She doesn't know when to stop, does she? Brick said, appearing beside Damon with 2 beers. People like her never do. They think their position protects them. Damon accepted the beer, taking a long drink. She's probably been doing this her whole career. This is how she maintains her power, by punching down at kids who can't fight back. Until now. Until now, Damon agreed. Wednesday night, Viper called an emergency meeting. We have a problem, he announced, and 50 men tensed. The school tried to limit us to just Damon. They said having the entire club would be disruptive. Can they do that? Brick growled. Viper's smile was sharp. Not if we invoke the state education code regarding cultural organizations and community partnerships. I've drafted a letter citing precedent from 3 similar cases. Either they let us all come, or they admit they're discriminating against a legitimate nonprofit organization. He paused. I also may have mentioned that denying us could be grounds for a very public lawsuit regarding educational discrimination and hostile environment creation for a scholarship student. Did they back down? The principal called me an hour ago. We're cleared for Friday. All of us. Viper's expression hardened. But Ghost, you need to understand. Once we do this, there's no taking it back. This will make waves. People will talk. Leo will be famous at that school, for better or worse. Damon had already considered this. He'd spent 2 nights lying awake, weighing his son's privacy against his son's dignity. Finally, he'd asked Leo directly. Dad, his 10-year-old had said, with wisdom beyond his years, everyone already knows. She made sure of that. At least this way, they'll know the truth. So Damon had made his decision. We ride, he said simply. Thursday evening, the night before career day, Damon found Leo practicing a speech in his room. What's that, little man? Leo looked up, embarrassed. Mrs. Pringle said everyone has to introduce their parents. I was trying to figure out what to say about the club, about what you do. Damon sat down beside his son. Tell me what you want to say. Leo's voice was small but steady. I want to say that my dad and his brothers are heroes. That they help people. That they protect their families. That loyalty isn't a bad word. It's the best word. He looked up at his father with those silver eyes. Is that okay? Or will it make her more angry? Damon pulled his son close. Leo, tomorrow, you're going to see something important. You're going to see that sometimes, the people society calls bad are actually good, and the people who seem respectable are actually cruel. You say whatever you want to say. I'll handle Mrs. Pringle. All 50 of you are coming. All 50 of us. Leo's eyes widened. Really? Really? Because when someone hurts one of us, they hurt all of us. That's what brotherhood means. That night, Damon barely slept. He reviewed his speech. Yes, Viper had insisted he actually write one, and thought about every word, every gesture, every moment of the next day. This had to be perfect. Not violent. Not threatening. Just overwhelming. At dawn, his phone buzzed with a group text from Brick. Formation at 0800. Full colors. Let's remind these people what respect looks like. 50 identical responses came back. Copy that. Friday morning dawned clear and bright. Leo dressed in his school uniform, khaki pants, and a white polo that made him look like every other Rosewood Academy student. But today his shoulders were back. His chin was up. You ready? Damon asked, straightening his son's collar. Are you? Damon smiled. Born ready. They drove separately. Leo with his grandmother to maintain normality, Damon to the clubhouse to meet his brothers. When he arrived at 7:45 a.m., he stopped dead in his tracks. 50 motorcycles stood in perfect formation, gleaming in the morning sun. Every piece of chrome reflected light like a mirror. Every leather cut was immaculate, the wolf patches visible from 100 yards away. And the men themselves. Brick stood at attention in clean jeans, polished boots, and his vice president's colors. His beard was trimmed, his expression serious. Beside him, Viper wore his cut over a button-down shirt, a briefcase in one hand. The others were equally presentable, dangerous men transformed into dangerous men in dress code. Brothers, Damon said, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you. For Leo, Brick said simply, and 50 voices echoed. For Leo. They mounted up at 8:15. The ride to Rosewood Academy took 20 minutes through city streets. The formation was tight, professional, 2 columns of 25 bikes each, Brick and Damon at the front. They obeyed every traffic law. They signaled every turn. They stopped at every red light. But the sound was biblical. 50 Harley-Davidson engines created a symphony that rattled windows and turned heads for blocks. People on the street stopped and stared. Some pulled out phones to record. Others just watched, mouths open, as the silent wolves rolled past like a mechanized army. At Rosewood Academy, Mrs. Pringle was holding court in her classroom, completely unaware of what was coming. Now, class, she said in that condescending tone she perfected over 20 years, we have several parents visiting today to discuss their professions. I expect you all to be on your best behavior and ask thoughtful questions. She glanced at Leo, who sat rigid in his seat. Leo, I assume your guardian won't be attending? Before Leo could answer, the sound reached them. At first, it was just a low rumble, like distant thunder. Mrs. Pringle frowned, walking to the window. What is that noise? The rumble grew louder. Closer. The classroom windows began to vibrate gently. Other teachers poked their heads out of classrooms. Students pressed against windows. The sound was everywhere now, growing from a rumble to a roar, until it seemed like the entire building was shaking. Mrs. Pringle's face went from annoyed to confused to concerned. What on earth? And then they appeared. 50 motorcycles rolled into the school parking lot in perfect formation, their chrome and steel glinting in the sun. They moved as one organism, each bike precisely spaced, each rider sitting tall and proud. The sound of their engines was deafening, primal, impossible to ignore. In Mrs. Pringle's classroom, every student rushed to the windows. The teacher stood frozen, her face draining of color as she watched the motorcycles fill the parking lot like an occupying army. Oh my God, whispered one of the other teachers, looking out from the hallway. It's a gang. It's a motorcycle club, Viper corrected pleasantly, appearing behind her with a smile that showed too many teeth. There's a difference. And we're here for career day. We're registered. He showed her his phone with the confirmation email. The teacher looked like she might faint. In the parking lot, the silent wolves executed their dismount with military precision. 50 kickstands dropped simultaneously with a sound like rifle bolts. 50 engines cut off together, leaving a silence that was somehow more intimidating than the noise had been. 50 men removed their helmets and hung them on their handlebars. Principal Harrison came running out of the building, his face red. What is the meaning of this? You can't just. Viper stepped forward, briefcase in hand, every inch the lawyer. Principal Harrison. I'm Viper. Legal name Marcus Chun, attorney at law. I called earlier this week to register Mr. Damon Sterling and representatives from the Silent Wolves Motorcycle Club as career day participants. You have our email confirmation. He handed over a printed copy. We're here in full compliance with your school's policies and state education code. But there are so many of you. The email specified Mr. Sterling and club representatives. It didn't specify a number. We're all representatives. Viper's smile could have cut glass. Is there a problem? Because I'd hate to have to file a complaint about discrimination against a registered nonprofit community organization. Principal Harrison looked at the email, then at 50 large men in motorcycle colors, then back at the email. He was trapped and he knew it. I know. No problem. But you must maintain appropriate behavior. We always do. Brick rumbled, stepping forward. His sheer size made the principal take an involuntary step back. We're here to educate the children about brotherhood, loyalty, and community service. Very educational. The principal swallowed hard. Room 204. Mrs. Pringle's class. They're expecting one of you. They're getting all of us, Damon said quietly. Lead the way. What happened next would become legend at Rosewood Academy. 50 men in motorcycle colors entered the building. Not running, not shouting, not threatening. Just walking. But the sound of 50 pairs of boots on polished floor created a rhythm like a war drum. Step, 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 step. Students peeked out of classrooms and gasped. Teachers stood in doorways, unsure whether to call the police or take photos. The silent wolves walked in 2 perfect columns, their expressions neutral, their colors on full display. They reached the stairwell. Brick went first, Damon second. The sound of their ascent echoed through the building, an ominous, unstoppable march that announced their arrival long before they reached the second floor. In room 204, Mrs. Pringle was trying to regain control of her class. Students, return to your seats. This is probably just some sort of construction noise, or... Leo raised his hand. Mrs. Pringle? What, Leo? She snapped. That's my dad. She turned to him, confused. Your father is loud construction equipment? No, ma'am. My dad is. The classroom door opened. Damon Sterling stood in the doorway, 6 feet of controlled violence in leather and denim. His silver eyes scanned the room and landed on his son. He smiled, a real smile, warm and proud. Then Brick stepped in behind him, filling the doorway completely. Then Viper. Then the others. They kept coming, filing into the classroom and lining the back wall, the side walls, until the room was filled with the smell of leather, motor oil, and the cologne of 50 men who'd actually bothered to wear it for this occasion. Mrs. Pringle stood frozen at her desk, her face cycling through emotions, confusion, recognition, shock, fear, and finally, a pale, sickly terror as she realized exactly who these men were and why they were here. The classroom was silent except for the soft creak of leather as the men shifted position. They didn't speak, didn't threaten. They just stood there, a wall of muscle and ink and barely leashed power, staring at the woman who had humiliated a child. Leo looked at his father, then at his teacher, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. Damon walked slowly to the front of the classroom, his boots clicking on the floor. He stopped at the teacher's desk and looked down at Mrs. Pringle. Good morning, he said pleasantly. I'm Damon Sterling, Leo's father. I'm here for career day. Mrs. Pringle's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I hope you don't mind, Damon continued, gesturing to the 50 men behind him, but I brought some colleagues. You see, I thought it was important that the students get a full understanding of what I do. He smiled. You've been so interested in my profession, after all. Behind him, Brick cracked his knuckles, a sound like gunshots in the quiet room. Mrs. Pringle went pale. Shall we begin? Damon asked. Damon positioned himself at the front of the classroom with the ease of a man who'd learned to command attention in prison yards and clubhouses. Behind him, 50 silent wolves stood in perfect formation, a wall of leather and loyalty that transformed Mrs. Pringle's domain into something else entirely. "Class," Damon began, his voice calm and clear. "My name is Damon Sterling, and I'm here to talk to you about my profession. Mrs. Pringle has been very curious about what I do, so I thought it was only fair to give her, and all of you, a complete answer." Mrs. Pringle remained frozen at her desk, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge. Her mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. "I am the vice president of the Silent Wolves Motorcycle Club," Damon continued. "These are my brothers." He gestured to the men behind him. "Some of you might be scared right now. Your teacher certainly looks scared, and I understand that. We look intimidating. We're meant to." A small hand raised. One of the students, a girl named Sophie who'd been kind to Leo when others hadn't, spoke up timidly. Are you a gang?" Damon's smile was gentle. "No, Sophie. A gang engages in criminal activity as its primary purpose. A motorcycle club is a brotherhood united by a love of riding and a commitment to each other. We're actually a registered non-profit organization. We do toy runs for children's hospitals, support programs for veterans, and highway cleanup." He nodded to Viper. "Our sergeant-at-arms here is a lawyer. Our road captain runs a construction company. Our treasurer is a paramedic." He let that sink in while Mrs. Pringle's face went from pale to flushed with humiliation. "But I imagine Mrs. Pringle told you something different about me," Damon said, his voice hardening slightly. "Didn't you, Mrs. Pringle?" The teacher found her voice, though it came out as a croak. "Mr. Sterling, this is highly inappropriate." "Is it?" Damon pulled a folded paper from his inside pocket. "Leo's essay. This is my son's paper. The one where he wrote about me being his hero. You gave him a 0. You wrote." He unfolded it and read clearly. "Criminals are not heroes. Tell your father to stay away from this school. We don't need his kind here." The classroom went silent. Several students gasped. Even the ones who'd laughed before looked uncomfortable now. "You wrote that," Damon said, not a question, about a 10-year-old child's father, in front of his entire class. Mrs. Pringle stood up, her chair scraping loudly. "You have no right to." "To what? To defend my son? To correct your misconceptions?" Damon's voice didn't rise, but it cut like a blade. "You're right that I've been to prison, Mrs. Pringle. I served 3 years for illegal weapons possession. I took that charge for my club president, who would have faced life under 3 strikes laws. I made that choice because loyalty, real loyalty, sometimes requires sacrifice." Brick stepped forward slightly, his presence reinforcing Damon's words. "While I was inside," Damon continued, "I earned an associate degree in legal studies. I read over 300 books. I learned 3 languages. I worked in the prison library teaching other inmates to read. And when I got out, I came home to a son who'd been bullied and humiliated by an adult who should have protected him." He turned to face the class fully. "So let me tell you what I actually do. I protect my family. I keep my word. I help my community. When there's a veteran sleeping under a bridge, my brothers and I find him, get him warm, and connect him with services. When a single mother can't afford Christmas presents, we show up with toys. When someone tries to hurt one of our families," his eyes found Mrs. Pringle's, "we respond. Legally. Appropriately. But we respond." Viper stepped forward, opening his briefcase. "Mrs. Pringle, I'm Marcus Chun, legal counsel for the Silent Wolves MC. I've been reviewing your employment history. In the past 5 years, you've had 7 formal complaints filed against you for discriminatory behavior towards students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. 7. He pulled out a thick folder. "Your principal has been very protective of you, but these complaints are documented. Public record." Mrs. Pringle's face went white again. "Here's what's going to happen," Viper continued, his lawyer voice smooth and dangerous. "These complaints are about to become much more public. We're going to ensure that every parent in this school knows about them. We're also going to file a formal complaint on behalf of Leo Sterling regarding your hostile educational environment and psychological abuse of a minor." "You can't," Mrs. Pringle started. "We can, and we will." Viper's smile was razor-sharp. "Unless you resign. Today." The classroom door opened. Principal Harrison stood there with 2 security guards, looking utterly out of his depth. I heard raised voices. "Principal Harrison, Brick said, turning his full attention to the man. Good. You should hear this. Mrs. Pringle has been systematically bullying students for years. My brothers and I have documented evidence. We can take this public, or we can handle it quietly. Your choice. The principal looked at Mrs. Pringle, at the 50 bikers, at the folder in Viper's hands, and made a calculation. Mrs. Pringle, I think we need to speak in my office. Now. But I haven't done anything wrong. Her voice was shrill now, desperate. These criminals come into my classroom, and we expose you for what you are, Damon said quietly. A bully. Someone who punches down at children because it makes you feel powerful. You call me a criminal, but I've never hurt a child. You have. You've hurt my son and God knows how many others. He walked to Leo's desk and placed the essay in front of his son. Leo, would you like to read your essay to the class? The real version, not the one Mrs. Pringle mocked. Leo looked up at his father, then at the wall of bikers behind him. Men who'd taken time off work, ridden across town, and put themselves on display to defend him. He stood up, his voice shaking but clear. My Hero, he read. By Leo Sterling. My father is the bravest man I know. Not because he's never been scared, but because he does the right thing even when it's hard. He took punishment for someone else so they wouldn't suffer. That's what heroes do. They protect people. My dad always says loyalty isn't just a word. It's a choice you make every day. He chose to be loyal, even when it cost him 3 years of his life. Even when it meant leaving me. Leo's voice broke slightly, and Damon moved closer, putting a hand on his son's shoulder. He's not perfect, Leo continued, but he's mine. And he taught me that family isn't just blood, it's the people who show up when you need them. Like his brothers showed up today. He looked up at his father. That's why he's my hero. The classroom was silent. Several students were crying. Even some of the toughest-looking bikers were blinking hard. Brick stepped forward and placed a massive hand on Leo's other shoulder. Kid, you did good. Mrs. Pringle made one last attempt to regain control. This is preposterous. I won't be intimidated by the truth. Damon turned to face her. Mrs. Pringle, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to remember it. You had power over my son because he was a child and you were his teacher. You abused that power. You're a coward who picks on people who can't fight back. He took a step closer, and despite herself, she flinched. My brothers and I? He gestured to the men behind him. We fight people who can fight back. We respect strength and courage. We protect the weak, especially children. You're not fit to teach children, and everyone in this room now knows it. Principal Harrison cleared his throat. Mrs. Pringle, my office. Now. Or I call the school board and the media right here, right now. For a moment, Mrs. Pringle looked like she might argue. Then she saw Viper tapping on his phone, saw the way Brick was filming with his own device, saw the determination in 50 pairs of eyes, and something in her broke. She gathered her purse with shaking hands and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back one last time. You think you've won, but we already have, Damon said simply. Because my son knows he's loved. He knows he's protected, and he knows that standing up to bullies, even ones with degrees and desks, is always worth it. Mrs. Pringle left without another word, Principal Harrison scurrying after her. In the silence that followed, Damon turned back to the class. Any questions? Real ones, about what we actually do. Every hand went up. For the next hour, the Silent Wolves gave the most memorable career day presentation Rosewood Academy had ever seen. They talked about motorcycle maintenance, brotherhood, military history, several members were veterans, community service, and the importance of loyalty. They let students try on helmets. They answered questions honestly. Yes, some had criminal records. Yes, they'd made mistakes. Yes, they were working to be better men. When the bell rang, no one wanted to leave. As the students filed out, many stopped to shake hands with the bikers. Sophie hugged Leo and whispered, "Your dad is actually really cool." Leo beamed. Finally, it was just Damon, Leo, and the 50 Silent Wolves in an empty classroom. Brick looked around. Think we made our point. I think Mrs. Pringle is updating her resume as we speak, Viper said with satisfaction. Damon knelt down to Leo's level. You okay, little man? Leo threw his arms around his father's neck. I'm better than okay. Thank you, Dad. Thank you all. He looked at the men who'd become his uncles in that moment. For being here. Always, Brick rumbled. That's what family does. The aftermath came swiftly. By Monday morning, Mrs. Pringle had submitted her resignation. Principal Harrison, facing potential legal action and public relations disaster, accepted it immediately. A new teacher, younger, kinder, recommended by parents who'd heard what happened, took over the class. The story spread through Rosewood Academy like wildfire. Some parents were outraged that gang members had been allowed in the school. Others, particularly those whose children had also suffered under Mrs. Pringle's cruelty, quietly thanked Viper when they saw him in town. The local news picked up the story. Motorcycle club stands up to teacher accused of bullying. The Silent Wolves charity work was highlighted. Donations to their toy run tripled. Leo became something of a celebrity at school, though Damon was careful to keep him grounded. Remember, he told his son, we didn't do this for attention. We did it because it was right. I know, Dad. But it's still pretty cool that everyone wants to talk to me now. Damon smiled. Just don't let it go to your head. 2 weeks after career day, Principal Harrison called Damon in for a meeting. Damon arrived alone, though Brick had offered to come along for moral support. Mr. Sterling, the principal began uncomfortably. I wanted to apologize. I should have investigated Mrs. Pringle's behavior years ago. I was complacent. Yes, you were. Damon agreed, not letting him off the hook. How many kids suffered because of that? Harrison flinched. Too many. I'm implementing new policies, anonymous reporting for students, mandatory training for teachers on bias and discrimination, quarterly reviews of any complaints. He paused. I also wanted to thank you. You could have handled this very differently. I could have, Damon acknowledged. But I wanted my son to learn that you can fight back against injustice without becoming what people already think you are. I wanted him to see that strength isn't always about violence. Sometimes it's about standing in front of someone and making them face the truth about themselves. Harrison nodded slowly. Leo's scholarship is secure, by the way, for as long as he wants to attend Rosewood. Good. He likes it here. Or he will, now that he's not being tortured by his teacher. As Damon stood to leave, Harrison spoke again. For what it's worth, I looked up your club's charity work. You do a lot of good in this community. We try. Turns out criminals can be productive members of society when given the chance. Damon's smile was thin. You might want to mention that to the next teacher who decides to judge a student by their parents' past. That evening, Damon took Leo for a ride. Just the two of them, cruising through town as the sun set. Leo's arms wrapped tight around his father's waist, his helmet preventing him from speaking, but Damon felt the trust in that grip. When they got home, Leo's grandmother had dinner waiting. Over meatloaf and mashed potatoes, Leo talked excitedly about his new teacher, about the friend requests he'd gotten, about how different school felt now. You did good, son, Damon's mother said quietly to him as they washed dishes. Robert would have been proud. Robert, Damon's own father, killed in a work accident when Damon was Leo's age. The reason Damon had first sought out the Brotherhood of the Silent Wolves, looking for male role models when his was taken away. I'm just trying to break the cycle, Ma. Be there for him in ways Dad couldn't be for me. You're succeeding. Later, tucking Leo into bed, Damon noticed his son had taped the essay, the one with the red 0, to his wall. Why'd you keep that? He asked. Leo looked at it thoughtfully. To remember. To remember that sometimes people will try to make you feel small because of where you come from or who your family is. But you taught me that what matters is what's true, not what people think. What is true, Leo? That you're my hero. That your brothers are good men. That loyalty and love are worth fighting for. Leo smiled. And that sometimes 50 motorcycles showing up is the perfect way to teach a bully a lesson. Damon laughed, ruffling his son's hair. Get some sleep, little man. Dad, yeah. When I grow up, can I be a silent wolf? Damon paused, thinking carefully about his answer. If that's what you want, and if you earn it, not because you're my son, but because you live by the code. Brotherhood, loyalty, protection. You prove you're worthy of the colors, and they're yours. I will, Leo promised sleepily. I'll make you proud. You already have, Damon whispered, but Leo was already asleep. 6 months later, Damon stood in front of his bathroom mirror, preparing for another career day. This time, he'd been specifically invited by Leo's new teacher, who wanted her students to hear about community service and second chances. His phone buzzed. A text from Brick. Need a whole squad again. Or you got this solo? Damon smiled, typing back. Just me this time. But thanks for the offer. Anytime. That's what brothers do. At the school, Damon found a very different reception. Students waved at him. Teachers smiled. Principal Harrison shook his hand warmly. Leo walked beside him, head high, no trace of the defeated child he'd been 6 months ago. In the classroom, Damon gave a presentation about the Silent Wolves community work. He showed pictures of their annual toy run, of the veteran housing project they'd helped fund, of the highway miles they'd adopted for cleanup. When he finished, a student asked, "Mr. Sterling, is it true you spent 3 years in prison?" "It is," Damon answered honestly. "Do you regret it?" Damon thought about that. "I regret the choices that led to it. But I don't regret learning from it. Prison taught me a lot about who I want to be and who I don't want to be. It taught me the value of freedom, of time with family, of second chances. So no, I don't regret my past. I learned from it." Another hand. What happened to Mrs. Pringle? Leo's new teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, cleared her throat. "That's not really appropriate." "It's okay," Damon said. "Last I heard, she's working at a private tutoring center. She's no longer in a position where she has power over vulnerable students, which is probably for the best." After class, Mrs. Rodriguez pulled Damon aside. "Thank you for being so open with the students. And thank you for what you did last year. Mrs. Pringle had tenure and connections. Without your intervention, she might have continued for years. I just protected my son." "You protected all of our sons and daughters," she corrected. "The culture here has changed. Students feel safer reporting problems. Parents are more involved. You started something important." As Damon and Leo walked to the parking lot, they passed a group of younger students playing. One of them pointed at Damon. "That's Leo's dad. The one with the motorcycle gang." "Club," Leo corrected automatically. "It's a motorcycle club." "Yeah, the cool one." In the parking lot, Damon's bike waited, gleaming chrome and black leather. He handed Leo his helmet. "You know," Leo said as they mounted up, "I wrote another essay. About what a hero really is." "Yeah? What did you write?" "That heroes aren't perfect. They make mistakes. Sometimes they go to prison. Sometimes they have tattoos and ride motorcycles and look scary. But real heroes protect people, especially people who can't protect themselves. Real heroes stand up to bullies. Real heroes show up with 50 of their friends when someone hurts their kid." Damon's throat tightened. "What did your teacher say?" Leo grinned. "She gave me an A+ and asked if she could share it at the next school assembly." "Of course she did." Damon started the engine, that familiar rumble filling the air. "Hold on tight, little man." They rode through town, father and son, the afternoon sun glinting off the chrome. Behind them, metaphorically and literally, rode the brothers of the Silent Wolves. 50 men who'd shown up when it mattered, who'd proven that family wasn't always blood, and that sometimes the people society feared the most were the ones willing to fight for what was right. Mrs. Pringle had wanted to teach Leo a lesson about knowing his place. Instead, Leo and his father had taught her, and everyone else, a lesson about underestimating people based on their past, their appearance, or their choice of transportation. As they pulled into their driveway, Leo's grandmother was waiting on the porch, waving. Brick's motorcycle rumbled up behind them. He'd followed at a discreet distance, just to make sure they got home safe. That's what brothers did. "You good?" Brick asked Damon. "We're good," Damon confirmed, looking at his son's happy face. "Family dinner Sunday? Wouldn't miss it." Brick nodded and rode off, the sound of his engine fading into the distance. Inside, over dinner, Leo chattered about his day, his friends, his new teacher, his plans for the weekend. Damon listened, one hand around his son's shoulder, and thought about the long road that had led them here, through prison, through bullying, through confrontation, to this moment of simple domestic peace. His phone buzzed. A text in the club group chat. "Ghost, you and the kid want to ride with us to the toy run planning meeting?" Damon looked at Leo. "You want to help plan the Christmas toy run?" Leo's eyes lit up. "Can I? Your family?" "Of course you can." Later that night, as Leo slept peacefully without the nightmares that had plagued him during Mrs. Pringle's reign, Damon sat on his porch with a beer, watching the stars. His phone rang. "Viper. Thought you'd want to know. Mrs. Pringle tried to file a complaint against you for intimidation." Damon sighed. Of course she did. It was dismissed in about 5 minutes. The reviewing officer was a former student of hers. He remembered her. Viper chuckled. "She's burned every bridge she ever had." "Good. Maybe she'll learn something from it." "Maybe. But that's not our problem anymore. We've got a toy run to plan and a community to serve. Yeah, we do. After hanging up, Damon thought about the question Leo had asked months ago. Can I be a silent wolf when I grow up? The answer was yes, if Leo earned it. But more importantly, Damon hoped his son would grow up understanding what the colors really meant. Not rebellion or criminality, but brotherhood, loyalty, and the courage to stand up for what was right, even when the whole world thought you were wrong. In the distance, the sound of motorcycles rumbled, brothers out on a night ride, free and alive and together. Damon smiled, finished his beer, and went inside. Tomorrow, they'd ride again. There were veterans to help, highways to clean, toys to collect. There was a community that needed them, even if it didn't always know it. And there was a son who'd learned that sometimes, the most important lesson isn't taught in a classroom. Sometimes, it's taught by 50 motorcycles showing up to prove that family, Real family, never lets you face your bullies alone.